Marquis de Sade started was the cult of personal pleasure. I really see that as a sign, though, that we're not meant to move as fast as we are currently all forced to. A language no one speaks, but everyone understands. Hello everyone, hi! So welcome back to another video where I share with you everything interesting that I have learned in my second year of studying literature. So in this video we'll talk all about the theatre tradition in Europe, what modernism really is, the purpose of laughter, and lots of other things. Everything you're about to hear is from my most recent semester of studying comparative literature at the University of Vienna. I've been studying there for 2 years now. I've started my YouTube channel at the same time. And this is the second year in a row where I'm taking some time at the end of the year to go through my notes again, pick out the most outstanding, personally revealing things that I've written down, and yeah, just pull back the curtain a little bit and let you into what has accumulated in this folder. Not everything, obviously, but, you know, the gems. I took a total of 5 courses this past semester, and I'll quickly tell you about them. First course I took was called Commedia dell'arte and the Theatre Tradition of Europe, all about the Commedia dell'arte's influence on literature all over Europe. The second course was called Uncanny Social Criticism, about Gothic fiction in the 20th and 21st century. Third course I took was a History of German Literature course from 1848 until the present day. And then I took a course in Aesthetics and Cultural Philosophy about Theodor Adorno. And lastly, a course that was called The Library in Literature, which was both about the history of libraries and knowledge management, but also about libraries in literature. Before we get into the points now, I just wanted to remind you of my French literature course. If you've always wanted to get into the French classics but you didn't know where to start, I hope you'll check it out. It's linked in the description box below. Linked below is also my Ko-fi account, so if you want to leave me a small donation for the work that I'm doing here on YouTube, know that it's always appreciated. Let's get into the first point now. Number 1, our collective image of libraries and the term called media nostalgia. Now, I think we can all agree that we're living in a fast-changing world where pretty much every aspect of life is moving into the digital space. And it's no different with libraries, where libraries used to be centered around physical books that you had to go pick up in person. Libraries now more and more offer ebooks, audiobooks, online journals, and even streaming services. I don't know if you noticed that, but if you go into a library that was built in more recent years, there's definitely more of a shift towards having good working spaces where you can put your laptop and a good Wi-Fi connection, as opposed to having access to a bunch of physical books. Anyways, even though all of that is true, when libraries are talked about in books or shown in movies, they still mostly look the way they did in the 19th and 20th century. In those books and movies, they are way more traditional than our current reality actually is. You could say that our collective image of libraries is a little bit retarded and that we almost romanticize old libraries even more than we used to. But anyways, what I learned is that there is actually a term for that longing for the past when it comes to media, and that is media nostalgia. So media nostalgia is not just a longing for the past, but a longing for the past as mediated through film, television, and books. And you can really observe this phenomenon if you step foot into a bookshop nowadays. At the moment, there are tons of books being published with the word library in the title. Matt Haig's The Midnight Library is one that was particularly popular. But in most of those books, again, those libraries look a lot more aged than they actually currently are. I just found that so fascinating, how reluctant we are to let go of our idealized images of libraries. I am the same way. I really see that as a sign, though, that we're not meant to move as fast as we are currently all forced to. Now, curiously, this phenomenon of being nostalgic about libraries is moving even more in the direction of bookshops. Like, there's a lot of books coming out romanticizing that little bookshop at the corner or something, which again, I mean, I don't want to be bleak, but with everyone now supporting the Bezos empire, might soon be a thing of the past. Anyways, media nostalgia makes total sense to me and was nice to learn about. Next, I learned about literary modernism and what it actually means. So I love modern literature, not to be confused with contemporary literature. I know that colloquially we often call things that are of our time modern, but that's not so in literature. Modern literature is literature that came out in a specific time period, like end of the 19th century until mid-20th century, something like that. Some of the most well-known authors of modern fiction would be Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, Marcel Proust. These books are often written in a stream of consciousness way. It's all about subjective inner experience and often like some pretty average person that doesn't seem to fit into society. So all of that I already knew. Like I love modernism, and yeah, I think if someone would hold a gun to my head and I had to choose my favorite literary epoch, it would definitely be modernism. But actually, so here's what I learned, here's what's new. Modernism is not so much a genre as I thought of it, but it's actually a phenomena where a lot of genres emerged all at the same time. And the term modernism is more like a salad, like the word salad. You can have tomatoes and lettuce and olives in the salad, and they're all different things, and together you call it a salad. It's kind of like that with modernism too. So again, what we call modernism is actually a multitude of genres and writing styles that came up at the same time. In German, we call it the Stilpluralismus around 1900. And some examples of these genres are Impressionism or Symbolism or Fin de siècle. And what all those genres have in common is a rejection of naturalism, which came before modernism, and a turning towards symbols and metaphors. Usually there's a focus on subjective experience, as I've already said. Often there is a focus on light and color, and what is also coming up around that time is a kind of meta-awareness of language, as well as a pessimistic undertone about the state of the world. And it makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, because around 1900, more people than ever were able to read, able to write. More people had the ability to travel, to print, to translate, all of that. So for the first time, so many little sub-genres emerged that had to have an Überbegriff, an umbrella term. Yeah, and that's what modernism is. Okay, next insight, a little bit of a personal one, and that is that I cannot escape, I think, learning Spanish and Italian. So doing what I've been doing for 2 years, learning about world literature, learning languages, and most relevantly for this point, doing research about literature, I'm just realizing more and more that I will have to learn Spanish and Italian one day. They're just two big languages in world literature. And that point really dawned on me in my Commedia dell'arte class. Not only was my professor Italian, but of course the entire phenomena of the Commedia dell'arte comes from Italy, from Venice. And so naturally, a lot of the research that I needed for my topic was in Italian. And I had this moment of going to the library with my professor, and he directed me to a book that I needed for my research. He gave it to me, I have it here actually. He gave it to me and I looked at it, and it's in Italian. And I was like, but I don't speak Italian. And he was like, well, do you speak French? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, you'll figure it out. And, you know, that's definitely one thing I love about the professors of comparative literature. Like, they don't shy away from using texts, even if they're written in a language that they don't yet understand. They're like, if this is needed, I'll find a way to figure it out. But yeah, not gonna lie, that was a little bit intimidating. But yeah, it definitely wasn't the first time in my studies that I felt a little bit set back because I can't speak Italian or Spanish. So I guess it was that moment in the library where I realized that I'm not gonna wiggle myself out of learning those two languages if I want to be a good comparatist. And I also do actually want to learn them, right? I think they're such beautiful languages. It's honestly just a matter of finding time to learn it. And I'm also honestly a little bit worried about mixing them up. I've heard a lot of people get confused with Italian and Spanish, especially. They're apparently very similar, but I'm determined. I mean, I'm wearing my Tutto Bene sweater today. Mostly though because it's August and it feels like March. Super strange. Anyways, it's fine. We're fine. Moving on, but staying with the Italian language actually. I learned that Italian was the official spoken language of the Austrian court in the 16th and 17th century. And later in the 18th century, it was French, which is wild. Like, how did I not know that? I really know nothing about Austrian history. So everyone who was rich and influential basically was able to speak Italian. And that is also why the Commedia dell'arte players, the Italians that, you know, came over the Alps and performed in Austria, they mostly performed in aristocratic circles, and they never quite caught foot with common people because, you know, no one was able to understand them. The common people watched a lot more English theater because there were also traveling English actors, and they were a lot more open to take in German-speaking actors into their groups. So yeah, just fascinating. I guess that explains where there is this air of, I guess, nobility and class or whatever to speaking Italian and French. I don't know. Now that I think about it, I think a little bit of that definitely stayed in our collective consciousness. Next point is a quick one about stress. So did you know that stress as a word has really only entered our everyday language use in like the past 70 years or something? It's interesting, like in the 19th century, for example, the word almost didn't exist. And we talked about that in my course about Theodore Adorno, and he wrote in the middle of the 20th century, and the word stress just doesn't appear in his writings, even though, you know, it would have been appropriate to describe quite some things. So the word was apparently first used to describe animals in a fight or flight response, later for soldiers. And, you know, now a few decades later, it's like the number one response to anyone asking you how you're doing. Goes to show how alive a language is. I remember once hearing a Terence McKenna talk where he asserted, well, he speculated that maybe the reason why we don't have a peaceful world is because we don't have the right words for that world yet. We don't have the right language. And I'm so fascinated by the way our experience, in that case, stress, right? The way how we're constantly under more pressure, how that informs our language, but then also how our language informs our experience. And just personally, the more I'm learning about all that, I'm becoming so much more aware of the words that I'm using, the words that I'm saying out loud, but also the ones that I'm kind of using in my head when I'm talking to myself. Next, I learned about Grammelot, a language no one speaks but everyone understands. So imagine this. you're a theater group traveling through Europe and the only language you speak is Italian. That was the case in the 16th, 17th century for those traveling theater groups. How do you perform in a way where everyone understands you? Now, the Commedia dell'arte actors figured out some different ways. For a time in France, for example, actors were only allowed to speak French on stage. The king was like, all these Italian players, like, we need French theater, and he wanted to forbid them, basically. So they used pantomime. They just reverted to speaking with their body. But other than that, they also used Grammelot. Now, Grammelot is a nonsensical, semi-improvised language, often used in theatrical performances. You can imagine it a little bit like babies or kids pretending to speak even when they can't yet. Like, it's a lot of gibberish and babble and chatter. Like, you're not using actual words or making sense. You're just making sounds, and it could be a different language that you don't understand, but it's nonsensical. And through doing that, you can imitate people from different regions without necessarily speaking their language. I'm gonna link a video in the description box below of an actor doing like a German Grammelot and a French Grammelot and an American Grammelot and a Russian Grammelot. And you'll hear that he's not saying any words in those languages, but he's speaking in a way where everyone, like kind of what the language sounds like to people that don't speak it. A well-known example of that is the Ketchup song. This I said ha heaven to the heavens and Nova. I'm gonna get a copyright strike for my perfect imitation. So that song is kind of Grammelot. The chorus doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not actual words of any language, and it was developed because to Spanish people, that's what English sounded like. They're like, okay, all these English songs are getting super popular. Let's just try and imitate them. But again, there's people that are really good at it. Dario Fo won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1997. I'll link one of his videos as well. So Grammelot, inventing a language in a way, was a way for those traveling theater groups to influence so many different nations, right? There are visible traces of their theatrical performances in all the most important writers of the time. Think Shakespeare, Molière, Cervantes, Lope de Rueda, Lope de Vega, and the way they used fixed stock characters that you could get to know. You knew what to expect by just seeing them, and then mix that with the Grammelot language. That really made them go pretty far, I would say. So far that even today, circuses and street artists, clowns, performances like Charlie Chaplin or Mr. Bean, they are all in a way descendants of the Commedia. If you are from Austria and you're like my age or a little bit older, you maybe know the Kasperltheater. And Kasperl is a descendant of the Gianni, which is one of the funny servant characters, like a stock character of the Commedia dell'arte. Faust in Goethe's Faust is often seen as a dottore character from the Commedia dell'arte. So truly the traces are everywhere, and I'm still having to write my paper about all that. Wish me luck. Next, I learned about the purpose of Carneval. So, you know how in February people dress up and drink and they're a little bit crazy? So for the longest time I didn't know where that tradition actually came from. And if we just look at the word Carneval, carne means meat, because Carneval was always at a time where the rest of the meat had to be eaten after the winter, because it couldn't be stored any longer without going bad. That's why it's such an indulgent feast, because you basically have to eat up all the rest of the meat, and then there comes a long period of fasting until, the first new harvest of the year comes in, April, May. But there was another, arguably deeper purpose for Carneval. It really is a festivity where everything is temporarily upside down. Think the religious structures and the political structures, everything that caused oppression in society had to have a moment in the year where that was broken, and those that were at the very bottom were on top, and the other way around. So it really served as a form of catharsis once a year. And Freud said that the purpose of laughter is being an outlet for psychic energy. So it makes a lot of sense. Letting go momentarily of the Über-Ich, right? Of the oppressive structure, that part of the psyche that constantly censors us, and just completely letting go in your outfits, in your drinking, in your behavior, whatever, allows the ego to find a way through laughter or jokes to bypass that censorship once and to let go of some of that psychic steam. Even in the church, there was this tradition of the risus paschalis, of making each other laugh on Easter morning, because laughter apparently drives away the fear of death. And if you want a very good visual representation of this, watch The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the 1996 movie. Watch the Carneval scene. You can also read it, of course, but the cartoon version got an A++ from my professor for being extremely faithful in the symbolism of what Carnival should be like. It's apparently very well researched. There's dogs walking people, fools being kings, the upside down world in a puddle. Apparently in Venice, where the Carnival comes from, married women were even allowed to sleep with other men in Carnival. And yeah, I don't know, I always hated Carnival, and I don't think I'm going to participate in it more now, but at least I can understand it a little bit better. Next, I just have to inform you about this extraordinarily beautiful poem by the best of the best, the GOAT, Jorge Luis Borges. In my library course, we looked at poems written about someone's own library, and Borges wrote Mis libros, my books. It's extremely beautiful in Spanish, and to practice my Spanish, to immediately implement what I've said, I'm gonna try and read it in Spanish. I've practiced a little bit, and I'll put an English translation over the top if I find a good one, and I'll tell you a little bit what it is about after I've read it. So, mis libros, que no saben que yo existo, son tan parte de mí como este rostro, de sienes grises y de grises ojos, que vanamente busco en los cristales y que recorro con la mano cóncava. No sin alguna lógica, amargura, pienso que las palabras esenciales que me expresan están en esas hojas, que no saben quién soy, no en las que he escrito. Mejor así, las voces de los muertos me dirán para siempre. So Borges in this poem expresses a really beautiful postmodern thought. He basically says, it's unimportant to me which books belong to me, whether I wrote them or not, but the only thing that is important is what they allowed me to become. He says the books that he read are a part of him, and that we all, as individuals, are the information that flows through us. And that's just so beautiful. It's a little bit how they say in yoga, right? Yoga is not about touching your toes. It's about what you learn on the way down. And so are books not about, having read a book or having written a book or owning a book. It's about who it allowed you to become. And honestly, that aspect is something that I'm most often missing from book reviews. Of course, it's interesting what the book is about, and you can go ahead and tell me what you thought about it, but I'm always most interested in what it has allowed someone to become. Like, how has it actually changed you. And it's lovely to have found a poem that encapsulates that feeling so perfectly, and a poem that motivates me to learn Spanish. Next point, the mystery of Shakespeare. Now, I think it's no secret that the existence of Shakespeare is maybe one of the most wildly debated topics in all of literature. Did Shakespeare actually exist? Was he one person? Was he more people? Was he Italian? Was he English? Was he a woman? Was he a man? And look, I'm not claiming to have done the research or anything, but my teacher, again in the Commedia dell'arte course, brought it up because it is incredible how much he knew about Italy. That's kind of unbelievable for someone who has never apparently been there to know so many details of places and people that really existed. Of course, he could have met someone in England who was Italian and has told him those things, but it's extremely strange. So maybe in those 7 lost years where no one knows what Shakespeare did, he did actually travel all throughout Italy or something. Our teacher also said that he did a lot of research on the sonnets once, and they sound a lot more like a woman has written them, also considering the time period and everything, and not a man. And yeah, what a frustrating, unsatisfying topic. I have this one biography by Shakespeare. It's called Will in the World. It was a present. It's great. But I started reading it, and the disclaimer in the beginning is basically, well, we really don't know that much about Shakespeare's life, but this is how it probably went, you know. This must have been the school that he went to, and his everyday probably looked something like this. And it's kind of unsatisfying to read because I don't know if I'm not even sure that he actually did all those things. I don't know. I'm gonna cut it short there, but let me know what you think. Do you think that's even important? I sometimes ask myself that, like, isn't that a huge distraction from just reading Shakespeare? Is it so important who he was? I'd love to hear some thoughts. Next lesson I learned was where Gothic literature started. So it's obviously always an interesting thing to research where a specific genre comes from, especially one as big and influential as all of Gothic literature. Michel Foucault came to the conclusion that it started with Maquis de Sade, a French author born in 1740. What Sade did was that he said everything that was suppressed and horrible and what no one would ever dare to say in literature for the first time. So Sade didn't have an easy life. He was in prison at the Bastille, and he wrote about the most awful things. I haven't read any of his books yet. I don't think I want to. 120 Days of Sodom is apparently just a catalog of every way you can torture a person. It's about a group of sadists that retrieve into a castle and can do whatever they want with women they kidnapped. I'm not gonna go into the detail, but there's an extreme focus on sexuality. It's just apparently awful. Our teacher said, don't start with that book. And the word sadism actually comes from Maquis de Sade. So his books are really anti-fairy tales, right? Where the good ones get punished and the bad ones are rewarded. And there's a chapter in the Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer that say that basically what Maquis de Sade started was the cult of personal pleasure, right? This idea that my own pleasure shouldn't have any limits and I can do whatever I want. Basically the opposite of Kant, right? Where Kant called us to act in a way that can become a law. We have to think about everyone, we have to think about the smallest one, the last one, all that. Whereas Maquis de Sade's writing are a lot more about, well, if I want to do it, I should do it. And isn't that a sentiment that is very much present today? Maybe it doesn't display itself in such horrible ways as in 120 Days of Sodom, but the basic reasoning behind it is the same. I mean, that was one of the big icks I got from a lot of personal development books, and why I ultimately stopped reading them was because, well, it's just thinking about every person as living on an island or something, and that everyone should in fact be able to do whatever they want. And I just find that a little bit juvenile and something we kind of have to grow up out of eventually. Without wanting to sound extremely conservative or anything, which I'm not, but I think you know what I'm saying. If you're interested in that topic, Simone de Beauvoir wrote an essay about Maquis de Sade titled "Must We Burn Sade?" Should that kind of writing even be allowed to be printed? And her conclusion is yes, we should burn Sade. And lastly, I want to mention that I have learned a lot about the name of the rose and about Theodore Adorno, and about both of these topics I want to make separate videos, which is why I didn't include that much about them here. But for the sake of being complete, that totally has to be added here, and once I've filmed those videos, I'll try to remember to link them in the description box below. That will give you a bit more of a full picture of some deep dive topics of mine over this past semester. Okay, and that is it. Another video done, another year done at uni. Thanks for being with me on this journey. Thanks for always being so kind to me and leaving me such thoughtful comments. It's truly a joy to be able to make these videos and have them be received well. It means the world to me. Take good care, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.